It was a Thursday night in September of 1991, cool, calm, and ordinary in the forested hills just north of Colorado Springs. In the Church's family split-level home nestled among the tall pines of Black Forest, 13-year-old Heather Dawn Church was home alone, finishing her homework at the dining room table. Her two younger brothers were off at a Cub Scout meeting. Her mother had dropped them off and was attending a woman's homemaking class at their local church. Her father, recently separated from the family, had moved out just weeks earlier. When her mother returned that evening, the boys in tow, something felt wrong. The lights were still on, Heather's school books lay open, but Heather was gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no screams, no witnesses, just a missing girl and an open bedroom window. The investigation that followed would be marred by tunnel vision, forensic mishandling, and missed opportunities. For years, Heather's disappearance became yet another cold case gathering dust on a shelf. But this story isn't just about tragedy. It's about what happens when a case gets under someone's skin and stays there. When one person decides that failure is not an option. One of those people was John Anderson. He wasn't sheriff when Heather vanished. In fact, he was watching from the sidelines, frustrated with how badly the case had been botched. So he made a bold decision. He ran for sheriff on a platform centered around justice and accountability, and he won. And once in office, he vowed to make solving Heather's case a priority. To do that, Anderson brought in one of the most respected homicide detectives in Colorado history, Lou Smith. Quiet, methodical, and relentless. Smith was known for cracking the cases that no one else could. His involvement would breathe new life into an investigation that many had written off. And though he's more famously associated with the JonBenet Ramsey case, in the story of Heather Church, Lou Smith helped make the impossible possible. And while he didn't work directly on the case, another name worth mentioning was working in the same circle, and that was Joe Kinda. The legendary Colorado Springs detective would go on to become a household name through Homicide Hunter. But back then, he was just part of a team of professionals pushing for a higher standard of investigative work in Colorado. Together, they helped shape the future of law enforcement in the state. Over the course of this series, we'll revisit the night that Heather vanished, the flawed investigation that followed, the political shakeup that put Anderson in charge, and the slow, methodical unraveling of a killer's secret. This isn't just a story of a crime. It's the story of people who refuse to give up. It's about justice delayed, but not denied. This is Dark Dialogue, and this is the story of Heather Dawn Church. So, Angela, how's it going tonight?
Just waiting for the way that you say that. Good, how are you?
I'm good. It's been busy. I've been writing like crazy and investigating like crazy. And
yeah.
Maybe I'm just crazy.
Maybe we need to take a breath.
Okay. That's good enough.
All right, that's it? All you get?
That's all you get. Yeah.
Fine.
So, are you familiar at all with this case?
No.
Not at all.
And when you warned me that it would not be incredible, I didn't look.
Yeah, it's not an easy one.
I figured you wanted an organic response.
Yeah, this case sucks. This is one of those that it's hard to research, it's hard to write, it's hard to talk about. It just sucks.
I only played with location information on this one.
Very good.
Decided to keep myself unknown.
Perfect. Well, this is a case that is going to stay with people. A young teenage girl gone without a trace, no real forced entry, no signs of a struggle, and no real suspects for years. It's one of those cases where the silence is louder than the evidence.
Right? I don't like it already. Can we just not?
Sorry, you have to. So listeners, welcome back to Dark Dialogue, the podcast where we unravel the shadows of the human mind and dive deep into the mysteries that haunt small towns and big cities alike. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Angela, and together we shine a light on the stories that keep us up at night. Unsolved disappearances, lives stolen too soon, and the questions that refuse to be buried.
In this series, we're turning our focus to 13-year-old Heather Dawn Church. She was home alone on one evening in September of 1991, doing her homework, babysitting her little brother, while her other two brothers were at the Cub Scouts, and her mom was attending a homemakers event at the church. So by the time her family returned, Heather was gone, just gone. No sign of a break-in, no note, no sound, just an open window and a pile of school books left behind.
The kind of disappearance that doesn't make any sense, the kind that haunts the entire town.
And it haunted more than just that. It haunted one man in particular, John Anderson, a former commander with the Colorado Springs Police Department. He wasn't sheriff when Heather disappeared, but the mishandling of her case bothered him so deeply that he ran for sheriff in El Paso County, and he won. Just to try to solve. He wasn't a politician. He was a father, a cop, and he wasn't going to let this one slip through the cracks.
And he didn't do it alone. Enter Lou Smith, one of the most respected cold case investigators in the country. His name might ring a bell for people who followed the John Benet Ramsey case, but before that, he was quietly solving the unsolvable, and Heather's case was one of them.
Lou Smith brought a different kind of energy to the investigation. He was quiet, relentless, patient. He looked where no one else bothered to look. And thanks to his work and Anderson's and their whole team and their refusal to give up, justice finally caught up with a douchebag asshat who thought that he'd gotten away with murder.
And while he didn't work this case directly, it's worth noting that Joe Kenda, who I will talk about a little bit later,
Perfect.
another legendary Colorado Springs detective, was active during this time. These weren't just cops, they were cold case architects, and the impact they had still echoes today.
So in this first episode, we'll walk through the night that Heather vanished, what the early investigation got wrong, and how silence and assumptions nearly buried the truth. But this is also the beginning of something bigger, of what happens when the right people take the reins and refuse to let go.
Because sometimes justice isn't swift, but it can still be relentless.
This is Dark Dialogue, and this is The Forest Kept Her Silence. So Angela, you finally got to dig up some location information. I feel bad because we've been doing these cases and I don't know, I can't seem to help but do like multiple episode cases because there's just so much to tell, and I just feel like I'm selling the story short if I don't tell it all.
Okay.
So we end up doing these, and you do like one location information, and then we do like 6 or 7 episodes on it. So
Have I complained?
no, but it doesn't mean I don't feel bad.
It's all right. I get some census in today.
Yes, you actually got to do something on the locations today. So I'm going to hand it off to you.
Well, here we go. Settle in because you're going to hear me for a minute.
Perfect.
Colorado Springs is the home rule city that is the county seat and the most populous city of El Paso County, Colorado. For those wondering, because I looked it up, a home rule city is, quote, a municipality that has the power to govern itself through a locally adopted charter rather than being solely governed by state law. This means they have more autonomy to make decisions on local matters like zoning, public safety, and local taxation without needing explicit permission from the state legislature. End quote. In 1871, Civil War veteran and railroad magnate General Palmer founded Colorado Springs as a resort destination. The city was incorporated in 1872. Early institutions included Colorado College, which was founded in 1874, and a vibrant art scene bolstered by affluent residents. Envisioning a cultured, temperate city, he laid out wide streets and banned alcohol sales in early deeds. Did I read that right? I wrote that. Did I read that right?
Pretty sure it's, yeah.
Palmer's Denver and Rio Grande Railroad connected the city, spurring growth. Marketed as Little London for its appeal to wealthy English tourists, the city attracted visitors for its mild climate, the scenic beauty near Pikes Peak and the Garden of the Gods, and mineral springs. It became a haven for tuberculosis patient seeking the dry air, earning the nickname City of Sunshine. Nearby, Manitou Springs developed a... Never mind. You just... Potato over there. This Springs, that John knows, developed as a spa town. Where would we be if we weren't laughing?
100%.
At least in the beginning, because we won't be laughing later.
No, we won't.
Capitalizing on its mineral springs. By 1876, both towns were key tourist destinations. By 1880, the population was reported to be 4,226 residents. Did you miss that?
I did so much.
Growing just slightly to 281,184 residents in 1990, which is just a year prior to this case. By 2024, it was estimated to have grown even further to 493,554 people. I'll keep my 10,000, thank you. Now, as John has mentioned in past episodes, Nikola Tesla, really? How about we try that again? Nikola Tesla was a notable figure here, having built a lab and conducted experiments in the city in 1899, contributing to its scientific legacy. Since then, we've seen Joe Kenda, former Colorado Springs Police Department detective, featured on the investigation discovery show Homicide Hunter, as well as Dwayne Chapman, better known as Dog the Bounty Hunter, rise to fame from this neck of the country. Switching gears a bit, as of 2021, there are nearly 45,000 active duty troops in the Colorado Springs area.
Yep.
There are more than 100,000 veterans and thousands of reservists. The military and defense contractors supply more than 40% of the Pikes Peak region's economy. I said that right. I don't know why I repeated it. Colorado Springs is also home to the Peterson Space Force Base. Say that 5 times fast. I
know, it's a fun one, isn't it?
Yeah. Shriver Space Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station, U.S. Space Command, and Space Operations Command. The largest contingent of space service military installations. They are responsible for intelligence gathering, space operations, and cyber missions. And I knew it was coming out of Colorado, but I didn't know how big it was.
Oh, huge. Plus the Air Force academies in Colorado Springs, and Fort Carson is just south of Colorado Springs.
It's just insane.
It is military. And have you seen all the Terminators?
Just the second one, just the most. I'll be back.
Well, Terminator 3, they actually go to Cheyenne Mountains, where like the whole underground facilities at, where everything goes bad and it's like the apocalypse.
Oh.
That's the facility where the government can continue operations. It's this huge underground facility that's all set up to basically run the world after it's destroyed, which don't know how much point there is to that, but that is Cheyenne Mountains.
You never know.
Tons of military down there.
So now I will take us just a little ways to Black Forest, Colorado, which is named for a dense stand of ponderosa pines. Black Forest is an unincorporated community and a census-designated place located in El Paso County, Colorado. While technically just a few miles outside of Colorado Springs, this community feels like worlds away. Here you can take in sprawling views of Pikes Peak while enjoying being immersed in a tight-knit rural community. Why did I leave that word in there? I hate that word. American pioneers began settling the region in the late 1850s, drawn by the Black Forest's abundant timber, which was scarce in the surrounding plains. The area became a key lumber hub, with the first of dozens of sawmills built in 1860. By the late 19th century, Black Forest produced over 1 billion board feet of lumber for railroads like the Kansas Pacific, Denver, and Rio Grande, and New Orleans lines. In 1870, General William Jackson Palmer established the Colorado Pinery Trust, which I didn't know was a thing.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. He purchased 43,000 acres, making him the first major landowner. Lumber was critical for building Colorado Springs and Denver, with mining props also supplied to regional mines. The name Black Forest emerged around the turn of the 20th century, likely inspired by an early settler. Really, did I say settler? I'm struggling today already. We just started. Who compared the dark ponderosa pine stands to Germany's Black Forest. The name became more official with the opening of the Black Forest School, now Edith Walford Elementary, in 1923. The Black Forest Community Club, chartered in 1929, fostered social ties, and its historic log-built community center, over 80 years old, remains the hub for events like the Black Forest Festival. This might be the first time I didn't find census records from the time of incorporation. However, in 1980, there were 3,373 people reported in the area. And as I've said before, census records are really only updated at the 10-year mark, and this story takes place in 1991. So around 1990, they reported 8,143 residents, with a growth to 15,097 people reported in the 2020 census. Now, John's about to be utterly shocked at my favorite tidbit of learning about this location.
Can't wait to hear it.
The paranormal legacy.
Oh, yeah. I'm shocked.
Yes. He's almost falling out of his chair, people.
Damn near.
Black Forest has gained notoriety as one of Colorado's most haunted places. I'm so going someday.
Really?
Particularly due to a 1991 case involving Steve and Beth Lee's log home. I go to all haunted.
I'm just surprised that it's one of the most haunted. I did not know that about it.
Well, let me tell you about it. The family reported paranormal activity, including noises, orbs, odors, and apparitions, leading to investigations by the TV show Sightings. Psychics identified multiple spirits, including one named Howard, linked to a friend's deceased son. The home's master bedroom closet was described as a portal, and the area was called a rainbow vortex by a Hopi shaman, drawing paranormal enthusiasts. Beyond the specific haunting, local legends include tales of a headless horseman, a forest king, and other spectral figures, adding to the area's spooky atmosphere, and I can't wait to go.
Wow, that's super interesting. I never would have guessed. I've been through there a bunch of times. I've worked in the area a lot. There's a lot of like really nice houses out there now. But
It's all haunted.
I didn't know anything about the haunting part.
They're in a vortex.
I knew that the Stanley Hotel was considered like one of Colorado's most haunted places. That's quite a drive.
And I want to go there so bad too.
It's pretty freaking cool. Even if it's not haunted, it's just a cool freaking place to see.
I have friends that go and take pictures and send them to me with like little ha-ha faces. And I just send them back the little flip and the bird emoji.
Estes Park is a freaking cool place.
Yeah.
Anyways. But thank you for that. I learned all kinds of stuff. I've spent a lot of time in this area. I've spent a lot of.
Yeah, I kind of was like, am I telling John anything he doesn't know?
The haunting part, for sure, I didn't know.
That's because you're not into creep factor like I am.
No, not even close to as much as you are. But so
we'll change that.
Now we got to dive into this damn story. And, I mean, as you can probably tell just from my voice, it's a heavy one. It's not one I'm looking forward to at all.
Okay. But
not that any of them are good, but I don't know. These ones just suck more than the rest to me.
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about a young lady by the name of Heather Dawn Church. And so Heather was born on July 7th in 1978 in the El Paso County area. She was the oldest child who was born shortly after her parents got married. And the Church family was a Mormon family. Her dad, Michael, was a meteorologist and not a meteorologist, a meteorologist. And Diane was from Ashland, Kentucky. And Michael and Diane met at Brigham Young University, and they were married for 13 years. And then right before this story takes place, they'd actually separated and filed for divorce. And the divorce was just within a couple months of being final when all of this happened.
So not that it matters to the story, but are you just going to leave me hanging or going to tell me what a meteorologist is?
I didn't look it up.
Damn you.
That's your job over there on your little machine.
About to do it.
I meant to look it up and then I forgot to look it up. So I think it's something to do with like hydrology in oil exploration or something like that, but you might tell me that I'm wrong. But like I said, the Churches were going through a divorce. They were separated and Michael had moved out of the family home and moved into an apartment in town. And so the family home was going to be listed for sale, as is usually the case in a divorce. And it's set on 5.8 acres in the Black Forest area. And I don't know exactly where out there the home was, And so some of the Black Forest area is exactly like it sounds. It's forested, great big pine trees, and it's a unique area for sure for like these Western states because it's relatively flat. It's not like in the mountains. It's relatively flat out there. And there's these huge established ponderosa pines. And so it's not something you're used to seeing in the Western states. You know, typically we have sagebrush plains, grass plains, and then as you get to the mountains, we get the forested areas.
Right.
So Black Forest is unique for this area for sure, because although nothing down there in the Front Range is very far from the mountains, this definitely does set down in the flat kind of grass plains. And it's just this big stand of ponderosa pines. So it's pretty unique. So did you figure out what a metrologist is?
I did. And as I thought, it has absolutely nothing to do with the story, but a metrologist is a professional specializing in the science of measurement. They ensure the accuracy and reliability of measurements across various industries, developing and implementing measurement systems, procedures, and quality control processes.
So much smarter than me. That's all you had to say.
And me too. He studies the science of measurement. I did not know such a thing exists.
I didn't either, but there's a science that studies absolutely everything.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't surprise me. So pretty sharp cat, apparently.
Science that studies me.
Yeah, they'd have to close the university if they started trying to figure me out. So anyways, so the family homes, like I said, it set on 5.8 acres out there. And what I was going to say is the area has the forest just like we described and everything, but then it also has grass plains. And I kind of got the idea from the research. I couldn't find the address of their house, which is fine. I don't need to know it, but I couldn't find it. And so therefore I couldn't locate whether it was in the forested part or not. But all the research and everything led me to believe that it was not actually in the trees. It was kind of more in the rolling grass hills area of that Black Forest area. So it's really neither here nor there, but they're not setting back up in the forest. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
They're setting more kind of out in the grass plains. And they lived in a small single family house. It was a 4-bedroom. They had a den. They had peach stucco walls, blue trimmed windows, and a half finished patio. And, you know, it was a nice place. It was a nice place out of town on a pretty good chunk of land, almost 6 acres out there. And so Heather had 3 younger brothers. Like I said, she was the oldest in the family. And then after her was Christoph, who was 10 in 1991. And he was, I think both of them were Cub Scouts. I'm not completely up on the Boy Scout, how the whole Boy Scout thing works. I never was a Boy Scout, but I'm pretty sure that they were both still Cub Scouts, not to the Boy Scout level yet, but maybe a 10-year-old can be a Boy Scout. I'm not sure. It really doesn't matter, but he was in the Scouts. And then his younger brother, Gunnar, who was 7 in 91, was also in the Scouts. And then the youngest was a little boy named Sage, and he was 5 in 91.
I love that name.
It's a cool name.
It is.
And it was kind of, I think, really both Gunnar and Sage.
Yeah.
Pretty unique for 91.
I like that. Yeah.
We were still more in the more traditional name during that period of time. So the churches were kind of trendsetters when it came to naming those boys anyway. And Heather, her aim that she had completed like a church questionnaire, and she had said that her goal was to be nicer to her brothers. And they were an active
take it back.
family.
We were going to laugh a little bit again.
Oh, yeah. She seems like just a super sweet, just a great little girl. And
be nicer to my brother.
Yep.
That is sweet.
And so all the kids were raised in that Black Forest area. And so they were out of the city. And I'm sure that the family felt that they were much safer out there than they would be in downtown Colorado Springs.
Probably.
If you've watched Homicide Hunter, which takes place almost exclusively, the original Homicide Hunter. I know he has a couple spinoff shows that cover all over, but the original Homicide Hunter is in Colorado Springs. It all takes place in Colorado Springs. You know, there was a lot of stuff going on in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, how sad that a show ran that long just from Colorado Springs incidents.
we think about it. I think Joe Kenda, according to the Homicide Hunter, I think he solved over 300 homicides.
Yeah.
Lou Smith had over 200 homicides, and they were just two of many detectives. So we're talking a shit ton of homicides in Colorado Springs. And there's multiple serial killers that operated in Colorado Springs throughout the years. And
look up the crime statistics, and I forgot this time. I'm a little rusty.
Yeah, it's my fault. I haven't kept you busy doing your location stuff, but we have several. This is going to be a 4-episode series, so you can definitely look up crime statistics to throw in for another episode, because we will be in Colorado Springs for the next couple episodes. But I'm sure that the family felt like they were safer getting out of the city and out there in the country, and the Black Forest area. And as you move up north out of Colorado Springs, there's Black Forest, and then there's the next freaking one, which is Monument. So there's
looks at me like I've been there and I know
Colorado Springs, and then you have Monument after Colorado Springs. Then you go a little bit farther up and you have Elizabeth, which is where the freaking most awesome Renaissance festival I think anywhere in the country is held, is in Elizabeth.
And Dark Dialogue's going to that as a team building experience, correct?
Yeah, straight we are, because it's freaking awesome. It's permanently built back up in the hills.
Permanent?
Yeah. It's
wow.
So you go in, and it's like a whole castle, and they stand up on the wall and holler down at you and taunt you and all that kind of stuff as you're waiting to get your tickets and go in. And then you go in, and all the booths are permanently built structures, and they have the arena where they have all the jousting and stuff. I mean, they have elephants. It's unreal. And it goes all summer long, every weekend, all summer long or something like that. So
nice.
A lot of Renaissance festivals, they come in and they're there for a week and then they move on. They usually set up in a fairgrounds or something. That one's unique because it's permanent there. So it's freaking cool. And then
well, I'm going to pick a fight with you. So we have to build the team building back up, and that's where we have to go to do it. So.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. And then, not that it's really that important, but then from Monument, you go up to Castle Rock. From Castle Rock, then you go up into Denver. So that's kind of the flow from Colorado Springs north up to Denver. So Colorado Springs sits quite a bit north, or quite a bit south from Denver.
Now that I think of it, I think I have family in Colorado Springs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty freaking cool place.
I think I do.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool place.
How sad is it to have a family so big that you're like, I think I have family there?
Shit, I do. I don't know. I have no clue where I had family. All over the place.
Throw a dart. They're probably related.
So Heather was an earnest little girl. She was individualistic, compassionate. Her favorite scripture was, quote, love one another. Her short-term goals were to get straight A's, to be kinder to her brothers. And she was just at that age where she is a teenager officially, but barely.
Yeah.
She's just entering that whole teenage realm at 13. And she had gaudy plastic earrings in her ears. And, this is the early 90s. And so the big round glasses that were so popular back in that time period.
I hated them.
I did too, but at the time they were the thing.
They were the thing.
And she was a little bitty thing, 5 foot tall, 78 pounds, had a sharp oval face, oversized teeth, and those glasses were those thick brown or kind of reddish framed glasses, that just magnified her hazel eyes. And then she had shoulder length, light brown hair. And she's a super cute little kid, and she was a good student at Falcon Middle School. So she was A's and B's, and she tested for the 8th grade gifted program.
Sweet.
So she was interested in animals, dollhouses, swimming, biking, tag. She played violin and studied earnestly, but avoided performing in talent contests and stuff, and instead decided to hand out caramels. And she said, I don't dance, I don't sing, I don't play a musical instrument, I don't do cartwheels, but I sure do love candy. And so the family was involved in, like I said, they were involved in the Mormon church, Sunday school, and she wanted to go on her mission to Australia and then attend Brigham Young University, and wanted one daughter who she wanted to name Persephone. And so she was the kind of kid that was just anxious to please her mother, especially after the divorce. That as being the oldest kid, I think that she kind of took the responsibility of helping mom out and stuff. And I don't want to give the impression that dad was out of the picture. He was still very much engaged, and he had the kids on regular intervals. So they would go spend time with dad, come out and spend time with mom. So a very typical co-parenting relationship. And it did seem like both parents, they got along. They just couldn't be married to each other. They couldn't live together, but it wasn't like a really contentious, nasty divorce at all. Okay. They still worked together. They were doing their very best to co-parent the best that they possibly could. And so Heather would often volunteer to babysit. She's at that age where, and I imagine it's still this way, but in 91, a girl that was 13 was like at that age where now they could start making a little extra money by babysitting. And so many kids, especially little girls.
I hear 13 a lot, so I don't think it's changed much.
Really? Yeah. 13 was kind of always that age, where you might have some 12-year-olds that babysat a little bit, but 13 was the age where you were at least mature enough that you could be left at home alone for short periods of time and watch maybe a younger kid. And so
I don't know if it's connected, but I feel like 13 is also the age where you can choose which parent. I don't know. I know all states are different, but the general age where you can choose which parent to live with if they're fighting custody type things. So maybe that has something to do with.
Might be the case. I don't know for sure. I know that like in Wyoming, there is no age. The judge will take into account what the kids say, but there is no age where a kid can just decide this is what I'm going to. And so she kept her room clean. She worked really hard. And that night her mom had decided that she was going to take she didn't decide. The plan was they were going to go to the Cub Scout meetings. She was going to drop them off, and then she was going to attend this homemaker class that was being put on at the church. And originally Heather was going to go, and then she asked her mom if she could stay home with Sage. And one factor that kind of comes into this is Sage had just gotten vaccinations that day. And you know how that is. He was kind of running a fever and feeling crappy. And so it was a pretty easy decision for mom to say, yeah, you could stay home with him. And at 13, there's no issue with that at all, like at all. So I'm certainly not criticizing her mom for allowing that, because it's something I would have allowed. I was very common.
To this day, people allow that.
Of course. 13-year-old girl to watch a 5-year-old little boy. There's nothing crazy about that.
Especially a brother. It's not like it was somebody she didn't know the habits of.
At her home.
Yeah.
And so I would have felt very comfortable doing that just the way that her mom did. And so that's what was agreed upon. And I'm sure that Sage feeling crappy factored into that decision as well, because any parent has been there. Yeah. When you have a 5-year-old or, a baby, whatever, when they're feeling crappy and they have a fever and you're trying to go to something, it's going to be a nightmare. They're going to be fussy and grumpy, and you're not going to get anything.
Rightfully.
Of course. Yeah. But you're not going to get anything out of the class. You might as well freaking stay home at that point. And so I'm sure it was a super easy decision. And it was only about 15 miles away, which might sound like a long ways unless you live in Wyoming or Colorado.
Yeah.
So, in which case,
nothing.
It's like right down the street. It's like going literally down the block for somebody that lives in the city. And mom left about 5:30 and made sure all the doors were locked and everything. And as she was backing out, she noticed that the bedroom window was open. And so she thought, well, when I call Heather, because she was going to call her and check in, make sure everything was going good. So she thought, when I call, I'll just make sure to tell her to shut that window. And she did call at 8:30. And Heather said that her and Sage, she asked if Sage could stay up a little bit because they were watching Home Improvement. If that doesn't kind of set the time period that we're in when Home Improvement was huge.
I just binged that whole series a couple months ago.
It was such a good freaking show.
Yep.
They really did a good job with that. But, so mom said, okay, he can stay up. She asked to really keep an eye on that fever, let her know if anything changed, and, said, I love you and I'll be home by 10 o'clock. And they pulled into the house about 10:15, and the house was dark. And when they went inside, Heather was gone. And as soon as she saw that, of course, she ran to Sage's crib, and he was rolled up in his blankets and just sleeping soundly. But Heather was nowhere to be found. And really nothing was, obviously, there was no signs of a struggle. There was no signs of a break-in, nothing. She was just gone. And so obviously Diane freaks out, right? And I think she probably did what most parents in this situation would do. At first, she was thinking, well, maybe she went, out in the property looking for something and fell down, banged her knee, couldn't get back to the house or something. She's walking around the house, screaming her name and all that kind of stuff. Nothing. And then she calls Michael and asked if he had her, which might sound odd, but I think it was just a kind of a Hail Mary type of thing.
Yeah.
Like maybe on, for some odd reason, but
he would have certainly taken Sage too.
Yeah, he would have.
Wait.
At this point, she's probably in full panic. So she's not thinking rationally. She's just, honestly, she's probably just grasping at straws of anything. And so he said, no, I don't have her. But he said immediately he had a feeling. He knew, and he said, call 911 right now. I'm on my way. And so Diane hung up and called 911. And what do you think she was told?
You have to wait 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, she probably is with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And this pisses me off in this particular case, even more than the other ones where we've talked about it, because we're not talking about a girl that went to school and didn't come home from school. We're not talking about a girl that was out with friends at the roller skating rink or whatever.
Yeah.
We're talking about a girl that was home alone watching her younger brother and disappeared. So this idea that she would have run off is absolutely absurd to me. And the fact that's what she was told pisses me off. But
especially a girl who called to ask if he could stay up later to watch a show. If she was going to run away, she would have just let him stay up later to watch a show without asking.
Right. And the idea that she would leave her brother alone as she ran off. And
she showed the responsibility of asking if he could stay up later when maybe she could have covered it up anyway. Mom might not have known.
Right. And
so she wouldn't be doing something like this then.
No. And then you also got to take into account again, where this is not.
Where's she going to go?
This is not downtown Colorado Springs. We're miles out of town. Where in the hell is she going to go? They're out on 6 acres.
That was the thing my parents had too when they moved us out there. They're like, well, you'll never sneak out. Yeah, because there's nowhere to go out here.
Exactly. And this was that case.
Yep.
So it's just absolutely absurd to me. But she didn't give up. She kept freaking calling and kept calling.
Good job, Mom.
Finally, they sent a deputy out. And I got to say, man, hats off to this deputy at least, because when he got out there, he was like, oh, no, this is not a rental. So he called in and was like, we need everybody out here now because this little girl is disappeared and she did not run away.
Yeah.
So they did, thanks to Mom's persistence. And then, Dad also got out. He, busted ass out there from his apartment. So he's out there. And after Diane was told, well, she has to be gone for so long, probably ran off with friends or whatever, then she started calling friends and was like, can you come help me search?
Yeah.
And so there was a whole bunch of family friends and stuff that showed up out there as well because they were searching for this little girl. So they're all over the property. Well, worst case scenario for a crime scene. But
trampling it all down.
When the sheriff's office tells you tough luck, deal with it yourself, what the hell are you supposed to do?
You deal with it.
You do exactly what she did.
Yeah.
And this is what I would have done too, is call as many freaking people as humanly possible to get out there and start searching. It's what I have done.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know what? Just a little, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about this, but just a little bit of a foreshadowing. We've got a sheriff by the name of Bernard Berry, who is leading the El Paso County Sheriff's Office at this time. He was first elected in 1986. He was reelected in 1990, and his office was plagued with scandals from deputy misconduct, budget issues. He was criticized for lax investigative practices. He just wasn't a very great sheriff. So El Paso County Sheriff's Office served all of El Paso County, obviously, over 1,900 square miles with both a mix of urban and rural areas. And he had about 200 to 250 personnel at the time, with all of his deputies, his jail staff, all of the support staff, everybody. And that would have been divided into patrol, investigations, jail operations. And he had a relatively small investigative force of around 10 to 15 detectives. And they were undertrained for major crimes. Their focus was on rural stuff, and they had very strained resources. The county during this period of time was just plagued with underfunding. Their budget in 91 was like 10 to 12 million, which was completely insufficient for as fast as the county was growing. You know, his county included Colorado Springs.
400 and some thousand people. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's a big freaking county, a lot of people. And with as much good as our military personnel do, and obviously they keep us safe, they protect us. But anytime that you have a large population of military personnel in an area, you have issues. For the most part, especially in 91, there wasn't a lot of females in the military. Obviously, it was growing, but it was predominantly a bunch of single males that are dropped into an area, and we're talking thousands of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, just that by itself, you have all kinds of, and most of it's minor crimes, drinking and just nonsensical bullshit that 18, 19, 20-year-old dipshit boys do when they're running around. You know, we all did it, but it does task the law enforcement agencies to deal with all that bullshit that comes with it, you know? And then anytime you bring in that many people, a good portion of those, or a percentage, I shouldn't say a good portion, a percentage of those people is going to be criminals. And we know that every place there's military bases, a certain percentage of the military personnel, soldiers, sailors, airmen, whatever it is, are criminals. And so they start committing crimes in that area. They got to deal with that. So this sheriff's office, along with the Colorado Springs Police Department, they got a lot of shit going on. They got a lot of stuff to deal with. And you got to budget enough money for them to be able to handle it. And, you know, to our earlier conversation with Homicide Hunter and all of the crimes that were going on in Colorado Springs, that's obviously going to extend out into the county as well.
Yeah.
You know, then they had outdated equipment. He restricted overtime. It was just a completely mismanaged department. And then there were multiple deputy misconduct cases, excessive force complaints, DUI arrests of off-duty deputies, misuse of funds complaints. A 1989 internal probe revealed favoritism in promotions. The public trust had completely eroded in the department. And the Gazette-Telegraph criticized the El Paso County Sheriff's Office as being dysfunctional. And Barry's response was defensive, and he took little to no accountability. And in their investigative practices, they had very lax protocols, no standardized crime scene management. Fingerprints were often mishandled. There was no chain of custody set up. They didn't use the FBI resources like VICAP or APHIS, and cold cases were just flat out neglected. And then you have the rural area of Black Forest. And so by the time Diane finally convinced him to send a deputy, it was about 30 to 45 minutes. So Sheriff Barry really fostered a culture of complacency within the El Paso County Sheriff's Department with all the crap that we already talked about, political favoritism. And you know what that's going to do to the morale of a department. If the only way that you can get promoted is who you know, whose ass you kiss, and not by your performance,
that's never a good thing.
It's going to destroy morale, which it did. And then, so then it breeds kind of a split. And I don't know enough about it to say for sure whether this happened, but I'm almost positive it did, because it always does, where you have these officers that are loyal to the sheriff, and then these officers that think he's a dipshit and can't wait for him to get out of there. And so they hate each other. So you have your own officers that are on two different sides of the same team.
Yeah.
And it's not unusual. I hope that we're getting away from that. And I think in a lot of places we are, but it still happens, and it probably always will happen to a certain degree. But from what I understand, it was pretty freaking bad during this period of time.
Okay.
So once on the scene, they got out there, they searched, they treated it though, essentially like it was a runaway or just a missing juvenile, like she wandered off, and they didn't really treat it like an abduction. They did, thank God, that one of the officers did notice that the screen in the master bedroom window was like not put in correctly.
Oh, okay.
And so they fingerprinted it, and they did pull fingerprints off of that screen, which will come into play later, but they didn't secure the scene. I know we haven't covered the John Benet Ramsey case, but I've mentioned it several times, and it's remarkable how similar this case is to that. They didn't secure the scene, so all of the friends and family that came out to help search were all over the freaking place, in and out of the house. And so we know that's never a good thing for a crime scene, and there just really was an absolute lack of urgency on the part of the sheriff's office. So they really didn't search during the night. They waited until the light of day, and they said
valuable hours.
Yeah. And they said it was just too dark. They couldn't do it. And so there was no floodlights, no helicopters, no canine units deployed immediately. And they just postponed everything until daylight. And then they, once they did kind of start searching, they, went and, knocked on neighbors' doors and asked if they'd seen her and that kind of stuff. But it was just very lackadaisical, and frankly, it just pisses me off the way that it was handled. I don't know how. We talked about this before with them treating it like she ran away, but at this point, I don't know why you don't have roadblocks set up
right
all the way around there. Nobody comes in and goes out without, because in my opinion, this is obviously an abduction at this point. Is there a rare maybe possibility that a friend picked her up and we don't know? Well, maybe, but you treat it like it's an abduction.
It's so rare, because she wouldn't have left Sage, I don't think.
And she's 13. She's not 16. So unless there's reason to believe that she's hanging around with older kids, her friend group can't drive. Not for a while. And I know that I said this before, but yes, we're talking about a teenager, but just barely.
Barely.
Not really, because we know
just long enough for the definition of the word.
Yes. A 13-year-old isn't really a teenager yet. They're not even into that whole.
Do they call him tween now?
Probably, which probably fits more because there is a delineation.
Yeah.
And really it can include 14, although by 14, some of those kids are kind of starting into that whole teenage mentality, rebellion and everything, but not very many 13-year-olds. They're still more on the playing with dolls side of things than they are smoking cigarettes and rebelling against mom and dad side of things,
right.
And so it just kind of blows my freaking mind that they would consider anything other than an abduction, but they did. And, the public reaction, the community was in shock. and obviously scared shitless. Here you are in this pretty small community outside of Colorado Springs where the bad stuff happens, and you're out here in the rural areas where you think that you're safe, and then something like this happens, and they had to be just terrified.
Yeah.
And parents in that area, and really probably all over Colorado Springs, had to be like not letting their kids out of their sight and just freaking,
where are you going? What are you doing?
Yeah. Panicked because of this. And then, so the public did get involved. The reporters in the area really got involved, and I think they were pretty great during this period of time, really jumped on this, and they started the Where's Heather campaign, and they had yellow ribbons that were tied to trees all around Black Forest area and along the road. Volunteers came out to aid in their searches. They spread flyers all over the place. They put billboards up. And then by October of 1991, the Friends of Heather Dawn Church Foundation was formed to, for fundraising and to drive some awareness. And over 30 officers, FBI, search and rescue were involved in that initially. And then residents organized vigils, neighborhood watches. And, the fear of this definitely led to heightened vigilance. And, then where you really start seeing this kind of bleed into Joe Kinda and the Colorado Springs Police Department is, none of this happens in a vacuum. And so parents in Colorado Springs are freaking terrified too, because this isn't very far away. And so the reports of missing children skyrocket in the Colorado Springs Police Department, as well as the El Paso County. So every time a kid is 15 minutes late coming home, they're calling the cops because they're freaking panicking. Of course, everybody's freaking terrified over this. And there was a lot of public outrage over the sheriff's office handling of this entire case. They were not happy with this whatsoever. And the reporters openly were criticizing the sheriff's office. And then the case was featured on America's Most Wanted, and that generated hundreds of tips. And, the newspapers, the TV, there's a TV station in Colorado Springs. They were
just one?
This. Just one.
Just one.
I'm pretty sure it's just one. Yeah. They were running all of this kind of stuff. I'm sure I didn't see any of this coverage, but I have no doubt in my mind that the Denver stations would have also been covering this. It's not very far away. And, the Denver stations are pretty good about covering everything in Colorado. Unlike some city or some states, like California or New York or even Texas or whatever, Colorado has Denver, and it's a pretty large city. But outside of that, most of Colorado is not heavily populated.
Right.
So there's not a shit ton of TV stations in Colorado, and so the vast majority of them are in Denver. And then there is one in Colorado Springs, but no doubt that Denver stations would have been covering all of this and everything as well, but nothing for the longest freaking time. And so, you put yourself in this poor family's shoes where all of this happens. They come home, daughter's gone, and then nothing. And then in September of 1993, almost exactly 2 years after Heather disappeared, another really weird ass thing happens. One of the reporters for the local TV station, and I think it's a CBS affiliate, if I remember right, not that's very important, but she gets this call, and this guy says to a reporter, this is jacked up, says to this reporter, I just saw something. And so she's like, okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, we were out on Rampart Road and I saw a skull, a human skull. And so she kind of got the specifics.
Just kind of calling a reporter instead of the police.
Yeah.
Okay.
And wouldn't give his name or any information. And so obviously she calls the Colorado Springs Police Department, and they go out and they do a search and they find a human skull out off of Rampart Range Road, which is just west of Colorado Springs. So it kind of I don't know if you're familiar with like Garden of the Gods, but it's this area it's got like all these really cool rock formations and stuff like that.
Mm.
And it's called Garden of the Gods, and you can drive up through there. And then off of the Garden of the Gods road, Rampart Road takes off, and then that heads kind of up into the mountains up there. So that's the area where we're talking about. And it's about 30 to 40 miles from Black Forest. And it's a pretty remote road in the Pike National Forest. It's used very heavily for joggers and mountain bikers and hikers and stuff. And in 91, it probably was too, although the population is considerably larger in Colorado Springs now than it was in 91. And they went out there and they found this skull. And so obviously it's been out there for 2 years. So it's mostly skeletonized, and it was primarily the skull, although then they did search and find other bones and stuff like that. No soft tissue, but there was evidence of blunt force trauma on the head, which was ruled the cause of death. And so that was sent to the Douglas County coroner, who performed the autopsy, and they made the identification off of dental records and confirmed that it was Heather's little body that was found off of Rampart Road out of Colorado Springs. You know, I said that Black Forest is north of Colorado Springs. This area is west of Colorado Springs. So essentially you got to drive all the way back down to Colorado Springs and then head west to get out to this area. So it was a pretty significant drive from where she was taken from. And so the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, still under Sheriff Berry, they secured the scene. Obviously, they are now working with Colorado Springs Police Department, but this is still their scene. This is their crime. And so at that point, the case was reclassified from abduction or missing persons to a homicide case, because we determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. So obviously it's a homicide.
Right.
And then not a lot more happens after that. They found the body, but they didn't really do a whole lot else. And I will say that they found some clothing wrapped around the neck. And so the cause of death was both strangulation and blunt force trauma. And obviously, because of the decomposition over 2 years laying out there, It was hard for him to make a definitive determination, but it was homicide. So, and then, you know, not a whole hell of a lot else goes on. And so if you haven't read the book, John Wesley Anderson wrote the book, literally wrote the book, entitled Lou and John Bonet. And it was about Lou Schmidt's involvement in the John Bonet Ramsey case. But in that book, John Anderson goes quite in depth into how all of this transpired, his whole career. So John Anderson started with the Colorado Springs Police Department in 1972 as an officer. And he continued to just work up through the ranks with the department. At one time, he worked under Joe Kinda. Joe Kinda was his boss. And then he was at some kind of a seminar or something like that. And at this seminar, they told him, you know, write down like they do in all those kind of seminars, write down your goals for the end of this year, and where do you see yourself in 5 years, and where do you see yourself, whatever. And one of his goals was, I want to run a major law enforcement department. And he said that he hadn't really realized it, but a lot of the stuff that he was doing in his career at that time was not moving him towards that goal. And so he needed a few other areas to kind of fill out his resume, you know, and he accepted other positions, be it, what do you call it when the freaking cops investigate themselves?
Oh.
Internal affairs.
Yeah.
You know, be it like IA or internal affairs, which is a position that he accepted because, you know, although he'd been involved in like minor deals, you know, if you're in a leadership role with rank in like a police department or something, if one of your officers has a citizen complaint or something, they were rude to him or whatever, you do a little bit of your own investigation, but as far as like really investigating law enforcement officers, and that's reserved for IA investigation. So he had an opportunity to do that, and he jumped on it. And by the time, this discovery of the body and everything rolled around, John Anderson had pretty well filled out his resume because he had been focused on doing that. He took a teaching position for a while. He taught, when he was early in his career, he asked, how can I move up the ranks? How can I become an investigator? All this, they said, get a college education. So while he was working as an officer, he was also attending college classes to get his degree. He's really focused, and he was teamed up with Lou Schmidt. And so him and Lou Schmidt were partners, worked together on multiple different cases. Anytime you're going to hear me talk about Lou Schmidt, I talk about him with a large degree of respect because I think he's one of the freaking best detectives.
Right.
He's legendary in the entire country, not just in Colorado. And so having an opportunity for an investigator to work under Lou Schmidt was huge. And, he learned a lot from that. And he watched this Heather Dawn Church case basically die on the vine with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. And he was getting extremely frustrated about it. And he knew that I can't remember exactly what position he was in with the Colorado Springs Police Department at this particular time, but he knew that he would never have any impact whatsoever on the Heather Dawn Church case because here he is in Colorado Springs. It's out of their jurisdiction.
Right.
And so he made the decision that he was going to run for El Paso County Sheriff. And it's a position that his uncle, I believe, his uncle or his granddad, or he comes from a line of cops. And one of his relatives had been the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, had been the El Paso County Sheriff in years past. So this kind of runs in his blood anyway. And so in early 1994, he decided that he was going to run. And he announced his candidacy. He did it. The guy is a freaking straight up dude. He went to his boss and said, I've decided to do this. And so
instead of just bailing.
Yeah. And actually, if I remember correctly, that's when his boss moved him into IA because he didn't want him in any position that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. And so that kind of rounded out his resume being put in IA at that period of time. And then he went to Sheriff Barry and sat down and told him, and he had kind of expected that Barry wasn't going to run again, that he was going to retire. But Barry informed him, no, he wasn't. He was going to run, and he was pissed off at John Anderson for running against him. And so whatever, but he launched his campaign, and that kicked off in 94. And his message was his sheriff's office was going to be reform focused, emphasizing on El Paso County Sheriff's Office scandals, the mishandled cases, and he targeted voters through community meetings and media, and really just basically said, I'm going to do what these guys haven't been doing. They went and it was just a full on campaign. They had town halls, they had debates. And during these debates, he would highlight Heather Dawn Church's case as much as he possibly could. And it was really near and dear to his heart. I don't know exactly why. And I don't know that we ever know why it is that a case just grabs a hold of us and doesn't let go. But this one did for John Anderson. It just grabbed him and wouldn't let him go. And so he was going to change it. And he sat down with Lou Schmidt and asked him and said, if I do this, I'm going to need you as my chief of detectives. And Lou agreed and said, yep, if you win, then I'll be your chief of detectives. And so I think that's a good place to close this first episode. Gives us a pretty good idea of kind of where we're at. And where we were at in 1994 is almost no closer than we were in 1991. And you got to put yourself in the shoes of this poor family that, you're 3 years now with absolutely no answers. And honestly, the sheriff's department has done next to nothing to find your daughter, and then now to find your daughter's killer. So do you have any thoughts or input, questions, anything?
Just irritated.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking irritating. Heather Dawn Church did not run away. She didn't slip out the back door to meet a friend. She didn't leave a note or a trail. She was 13 years old, doing her homework, waiting for her family to come home. And somewhere between the rhythm of her pencil and the silence of that Black Forest evening, someone took her. The investigation should have launched like wildfire, but it didn't. The house wasn't locked down. Leads were not followed. Forensics were barely processed. And instead of digging deeper, law enforcement looked in at the family, at the father, at the usual suspects, while the truth slipped further out of reach. For over 2 years, there were no answers, no arrests, no progress, just grief, just silence. Until September 27, 1993, when a set of skeletal remains was found in a ravine over 30 miles away. It was Heather. And now the question was no longer where she was. It was who had put her there and why no one had found them yet. For a man named John Anderson, that question would not let go. He spent decades in law enforcement, but this was personal. He saw a system that had failed a child, and he refused to stay silent. He did what most of us wouldn't dare to do. He came out there, put his name on a ballot, ran for sheriff, not for power, not for politics, but to solve a case that no one else could. And he didn't know then what the investigation would uncover, or that it would lead him straight to one of the most prolific and dangerous men Colorado had ever seen. He only knew that Heather deserved better, that her family deserved answers, that someone had to do the job right. And so the search for justice began again, not from inside the system, but by challenging it. So next time, we'll step into that moment, the election of a sheriff with a mission, and the decision to bring in one of the most legendary cold case detectives this country has ever known, Lou Smith. Because sometimes the only way to find the truth is to start over. This is Dark Dialogue, and this has been The Forest Kept Her Silence. So before the headlines, before the manhunt, before the years of aching silence, there was Heather Dawn Church, who was just 13 years old, a quiet soul in a busy house, thoughtful, artistic, the kind of girl who loved to draw and who had a soft spot for animals. She was the big sister, steady, responsible, and protective of her younger brothers. She had just joined the Honor Society. She wore glasses, smiled shyly in school pictures, and had dreams that stretched far beyond the pines of Black Forest. She wasn't the loudest in the room, but she was the kind of person people noticed because she listened, because she cared, because even as a kid, she had that rare kind of depth that doesn't need to be announced to be felt. And she deserved so much more than what happened that night. Heather's life didn't end because she took a risk. It didn't end because of rebellion or recklessness. It ended because someone evil crossed her path. And the tragedy is not just that she was taken, but that the world never got to see what she would have become. A teacher, an artist, a scientist, a mother, friend. We talk about victims because their names deserve to be said. We remember them not for how they died, but for how they lived. Heather's story didn't begin in a crime scene. It began with a little girl who loved her family, who sat at her dining room table doing homework on a Thursday night, and who should have grown up to become something extraordinary. So tonight, we don't just remember the victim of a crime. We remember the daughter, the sister, the artist, the child who should have had her whole life ahead of her. So this is for Heather.
So if this episode impacted you, please take a moment to share Heather's story. Too often, victims like Heather are remembered only for how they died, but we believe the world should know who they were and the full truth of what happened.
If you want to support our work and help bring attention to more cold cases like Heather's, you can join us on Patreon or buy us a coffee at coffee.com. Every contribution goes directly into the research, production, and amplification of these stories.
You can also read our full case notes, access behind-the-scenes content, and get involved at darkdialogue.com. And while you're there, check out our Adopt a Victim program, where you can help keep lesser-known cases in the public eye.
Have information on a case that we've covered, or maybe one that we should? You can reach us anytime at info@darkdialogue.com. We read every message and we take your tips seriously.
Also follow us on social media to stay up to date with new episodes, upcoming cases, and ways you can support the search for justice.
This is only the beginning of Heather Dawn Church's story. Next episode, we'll follow the man who refused to let her case go cold and how one election changed everything. Until then, keep the dialogue alive.